I've been wanting to make this video for quite some time, probably over a year, and I feel that with the current state of esports in the middle of what's being called esports winter right now, it's, the drive is even more powerful for me to do this. So what I want to talk about is not related to any of the current events with the massive layoffs, and it's not on the business side of thing necessarily. This also isn't going to be a video on why esports I think is important to me personally, and important on a humanity side of things, on why competition is so important and valuable, and esports obviously falls into the great history of human beings' competitive nature. I'm going to be linking an article in the description by the writer Will Parton from, I believe, 2017, that I go back to every couple of years, that does a much better job of sort of pitching and selling the value, not like spiritual value, but like the humanitarian value of esports better than I could. So if you're interested in that, definitely go check that out. It is a really, really good article. It constantly inspires me to continue doing what I'm doing. No, what I'm making a video about right now, what I want to talk about is why esports should continue, why developers and publishers of titles should care about esports, what esports brings, how esports brings value to the people that make the games. Because one thing that is becoming more and more aware is that unlike other sports where no one entity owns the football, no one entity owns the idea of taking a golf club and hitting a ball into a hole X number of yards away, there are IP rights in play when it comes to making an esports product, especially when you are trying to monetize that product. So that's one of the big hurdles when it comes to esports, and why esports is now considered a marketing arm of the developer rather than its own entertainment product, which up until about 10 years ago was kind of the status quo. Developers would put out games and they'd make money off of the sale value. But then when it came games as service, free games, microtransactions, now suddenly these developers and publishers wanted to continue to control what the product was on the outskirts. And with the esports winter being the coldest and continuing to get even colder, my big fear is that a lot of games developers who put out really, really good, really, really strong competitive games, PvP titles, will wonder what's the point. They will look at esports and they will see, oh, we're just going to be wasting money in the same way that the Overwatch League is failing, the same way that Riot Games, one of the biggest companies in the world, Activision Blizzard, one of the biggest companies in the world, are laying off a bunch of their people. And again, I'm not going to go into the history of that, or why any of that is happening, or whether those layoffs are appropriate or not, considering record profits. But again, regardless, that's an entirely separate conversation. The important thing that I'm here to talk about is the value that esports has provenly brought to titles, brought to games, really extended the longevity of a lot of different games. I don't know if Counter-Strike 2 will be here if it wasn't for the long history of LAN parties, of Counter-Strike Classic, Counter-Strike Source, into Global Offensive, that has then, exploded into the international title that it is right now. I don't know if StarCraft would be such a huge brand that it is still right now if it wasn't for the Brood War scene in Korea that basically started the contemporary definition of esports. I personally don't think that the value of an esports scene, of a competitive scene, is strictly to keep people playing the game. However, that is one thing that it does really, really well, and it does that through a couple of different ways. The most important one is the aspirational element of seeing people at a top level compete in a game that you play on and off casually. If you're already one of the best people at the game, it gives you something to continue to strive for. Not just the prize pool of events, whether it's run by first party like the developer itself, or it's run by a third party as its own just sort of side thing, irrelevant to the developer of the title. It's not just the prize pool, it's also the idea of proving that you're the best, striving to succeed at something, and really tap into that human nature of presenting yourself to the world in a competitive way. But even for the vast majority of players who will go nowhere near that level of success in a game, even if they tried, it also reinforces the idea that there is something to continue to grow for in this game. If you're someone who is ranked silver, gold, whatever, on a ranked ladder, seeing people play at a level above you and seeing them actually put their heart and soul into that competition sort of reinforces the idea that, oh, there's value in me playing this game, even if it's just personal value, personal growth, and to continue to strive and get better at the title, maybe hit platinum, maybe hit whatever the ranks are in the game. They're all random nonsense names, right? But the point is getting higher on that ladder and actually striving for something. There's also the holy shit that's cool element, where you see something done really, really well, whether it's a new technique, a new meta, a new strategy in the game. You'll see that and you go, holy shit, I want to do that myself. That's tied almost directly into the sort of learning aspect that people will not so much anymore, but used to reference in esports all the time, where you would watch the pro players play, not necessarily because you cared about the stories, even though I think for most of them they actually did, but they would say they're watching the pro players play because they want to learn how to play better themselves. A competitive scene also reinforces the existence of a competitive community. There are multiple different reasons why people play video games. Some of it is because they enjoy the characters, some of it is because they enjoy the world, some of it is because they enjoy the competitive experience of this particular title over another. And so all those other people, whether it's caring about the characters, lore, whatever, they have their own communities there where they can engage in that topic, engage in that content. A competitive scene allows people to engage in the competitive side of things, which is another reason why when you talk about esports, you're not talking strictly about the top level of competition. You need to have a relatively understandable through line of, let's just, use names from Counter-Strike, for example, because they're some of the biggest in the world, right? There's Simple, there's Monetization, there's Zywoo. But like, if you're someone like a regular player, there should be at least a clear through line to how to get to that area. How to get up there. Like, how do I become Simple? How do I get to that position? That's more than just luck of running into perhaps another pro player in my games and they somehow notice me. That is, that's going to be part of it, right? But like, there need, like challenger circuits, like tier 3 events below that, which is why I'm excited to see more and more games include sort of the connections of like ranked ladder into that stuff. It's not perfect just yet, but things like that are really, really important, especially as more and more developers continue to have a more hands-on approach into how their esports ecosystem works. I'm also a really big believer in the impact of stories on our everyday lives. I'm not going to make this a political thing, but in many ways, the stories we tell ourselves are more important than the actual facts. So having these stories of the players and the teams helps elevate the impact of the games. There's the experience of playing the games in terms of what are the controls, what does it sound like, but then there's the experience of playing the game. There's the experience of being in the middle of a clutch scenario. There's the experience of you getting on with your friends and you're really all trying to grind the ranked ladder out together, and you're creating strategies and you're working together as a team and you're really coming together, and you can't showcase that experience through straight advertisements. You showcase that similar experience. It's not the same, but it is very, very similar, and we humans can relate to that when we see the humans of the players and the coaches on screen doing that exact same thing at a much elevated level. But it is still inspiring, and it inspires us, the average esports fan, to get on and want to do that ourselves, even to experience a small piece of that feeling. It's very similar to looking at streaming and how that has led to the success of a bunch of different multiplayer games. There's the classic Among Us, more recent Lethal Company. When you see these streamers with their friends playing this game and having a really good time, that showcases how good of a time you can have playing with your friends. So it's a very similar parallel when you're looking at that, but this is more specific to the competitive experience. You'll get a little bit of that with streamers playing competitive games. And there's, of course, what I mentioned before, the proven longevity of a game. If you just release a game and let it sort of have its own natural lifespan on its own, which is not something that publishers want to do a lot nowadays, with the whole live service model being a really big thing. You want to keep people coming back, you want to keep people playing, and it's gotten ridiculous, and I think we're starting to like fall back from the whole login for your dailies level of bullshit, but you want to keep people a part of your ecosystem for a fair bit of time, right? You're not just dropping it and stepping it away, which was the classic model. And a proven way to do that is to have some sort of esports product. And this leads us to the most important aspect of this video, is that it is basically proven that esports already does make a fuck ton of money. This idea of whether esports is sustainable or not is a bullshit conversation. What is unsustainable about esports is the current model of where the money goes. Esports already does make money for a lot of people. The players in a lot of games do make a lot of money. The talent, like myself, do make money working on these products. The only people that currently don't make money are not the developers or not the publishers. It's the third-party tournament organizers who aren't paid by developers to run events white label style. It's also the organizations, because we came from an era about 10 years ago where esports was fully independent and it was up onto the orgs were treated as a business where they would make money through sponsorship as well as a cut of the prize pool that their players would earn. And we're already going in this direction with the partnership systems that we're seeing in a lot of games. Like Valorant is probably the biggest one right now, but we're looking at the failures of the Overwatch League franchise system. We're looking at the failures of the LCS, the North American League of Legends franchise system, how it's not working out, to charge organizations to then be a part of your product that the developer is making money in because of the continual engagement of the people watching, who will then spend money on skins, whether they are esports related or not. The developers are already making money. The difference is they need to start giving the organizations a cut of that money because of the fact that they are partners, that they are a partner bringing in eyeballs, helping create these narratives, helping create these stories. The brand value that these organizations also are bringing in is bringing money to the developers. It's really hard to find the exact dollar amounts that bring me to this conclusion. It's very hard to find out there because most developers, they have their internal studies, but they're not publishing it. But you can find a little bit out there, especially regarding Smite. It's probably the bigger ones. Hi-Rez has actually been comparably pretty open on sharing their numbers. But I've also, in my, 7+ years working in esports, talked to a lot of people that all say the same thing, that the amount might vary, but people who engage with an esports product objectively spend more money on the game itself. There's a term in business called a loss leader. The most obvious example that I'm aware of is in a grocery store where you have really big products that you sell either to making zero money off of or at a loss. One of the classic ones that I remember hearing about was like Kraft mac and cheese. You would actually want to sell that as cheap as possible, but the point was that you would lose money on that product, but that brings people into the store to then spend money on other things that they might not necessarily have otherwise, and that's where you make your money from. Esports is essentially doing the same thing in the same way that all ad revenue is doing the same thing. You're investing into this product to get people involved in your ecosystem, either involved in the first place or involved even further, and they will then spend their money. It might not be on the esports product itself. It might not be on a product that is related to esports, such as like an esports specific skin. It could just be another generic skin. I don't actually buy that many esports skins in a lot of the games that I play, but I do pay attention to the esport. I play the game and I'll buy other skins. I know that's only one anecdote from one guy on the internet, but I would be shocked if that is an incredibly unique experience for myself. I like to think of myself as special. I'm not that special. I'm not that unique. So team orgs are the people that are most hurting right now because they've had to survive for so long off of venture capital, and they might have sold a bad bill of goods to begin with. That's by the by. The point is, they aren't making money because people are spending money on the games that they play. There's only so many jerseys that one fan will be willing to buy before it starts to get a little ridiculous. So with the partnership models that we're seeing, that is the way forward, and that is the way for sustainability. These developers, these publishers need to treat the organizations like the partners that they are in driving up the value, driving up the storylines, driving up the narratives of their esports titles. Publishers also need to understand how big their game is. Not every esport is going to be in Madison Square Garden. Back in the glory days of esports, where people actually made money, they would be in small theaters of like 200 seats. But if you know what you're doing, there's a way to make that still look grand and exciting for the audiences back home. You don't need to have the huge stadiums with all the lights, all the fireworks, all the pyromechanics. You just need to have actual creative people running the show. And that's going to move me on to a sort of tangential point of how to make esports as successful as it can be, how to make your esports product as successful as it can be. And it's hard because developers and publishers really like control over their own product, which is understandable, but you need to, for starters, not try and make everything the fucking NFL, especially not in its first year. Hell, the NFL wasn't even the NFL that we know today in its first couple of years. It took a while for the NFL, for the NBA, for all these gigantic sporting leagues to get to as big as they are now. you need to have a reasonable level of growth. Start small, don't overcommit. But if you have creative people controlling the show, controlling the process, you will still get viewership if the product is good. And products are good not because of the investment into the lighting, into the cameras. It's good because of the creative minds behind everything. Obviously, as a commentator myself, there's going to be a little bit of bias here, but I truly believe that it's the creative minds of the producers, of the writers, of the commentators that elevate the value of a show more than having like some sick CGI dragon come on down. Like, that's stuff that you look at year 5, year 6, year 7. That's not something that you do at the very beginning of year 1. And speaking of creative individuals, on the creative side of these productions, there is a real worrying sign of people at the top looking purely at the numbers and saying, oh, let's cut this person, oh, let's cut that person, oh, let's cut this person. When it comes to commentators, I can talk about commentators specifically because this is what I'm clearly most familiar with. From event to event, month by month, week by week, when you change the commentator from someone who is a super experienced, very high quality, to someone who is new and just starting out, it barely moves the dial on viewership. However, that's short term. Long term, if you lose the quality of the creative people involved in the product, over time, the infatuation of that product, the love that the audience has for the product will start to go down. And for most people that were fans of a show, they might not necessarily be able to point to the fact that, oh, I stopped watching because this commentator is not on there anymore. I stopped watching because it's been the same graphics HUD for 5 years straight. But they'll just say, I got a little bored of it. They might be able to tell you why, they might not, but the point is that an investment into high quality is a long-term strategy. Making cuts that have no visible effects in the short term will destroy you in the long run. As a final note, I do also think that there is a way to make your esports product more profitable than strictly as an advertising arm, as an engagement arm of your publishing. One of the biggest ways to be able to do that is a pay-per-view model. For people out there that say that they will stop watching a game if it's not free, they are the most irrelevant because they are not providing any money. Sponsorships on screen barely move the dial, barely pay for the camera that is pointing at the poster of the sponsor on the wall. But as I said, viewership does help make the developer make money through secondary, tertiary ways in the game itself that aren't directly related to the esports product in question. And so because of that, providing the content for free does have value, but that doesn't mean that there aren't ways to make more money on top of that. One of the more successful models from previous eras of esports is that you would either charge for a higher quality of stream. So like, let's say the 480p, or I guess, because it's 2024, the 720p quality stream would be broadcast for free. But if you wanted 1080 or I think we're above that now, like we're at 1440 or some shit. If you want like higher quality than that, 4K quality, then you would pay a subscription for that. And frankly, the amount of people that are willing to spend their like Twitch subscription or whatever, $5 a month on some random solo streamer, but aren't willing to put it into esports, I don't need to tell you why that's absolutely ridiculous. Pay $5. You already pay like $17 for Netflix at this point and you barely watch any of it. Pay $5 for the 4K stream. You're gonna have a much better time. There's also having the stream be at the max quality for free, but if you want the VODs, then it's like subscriber only VODs. There are multiple different ways that you can publish the content out there for free for the public to get people engaged in the game, the product that is the game that the esports is playing on, as well as also engaging with people who want to engage with the esports product as its own standalone entertainment product in the way that like wrestling is, the way that NBA is, etc. The worst thing you can do as a creative is listen to the fans, and the fans that say that they refuse to watch anything that's not free, don't listen to them. And I understand that it's hard because there's the want to create a community to bring people into your ecosystem. You want to give like free trials, free samples out to get them actually interested in the product that they will then spend money on. But you have to actually get them to spend money on, and buying a stupid little icon of a team organization like is not nearly the big spender that people hope that it would be for team organizations. They want team skins, but also just give them a cut of the skins in general. And and especially if you're able, because data is so big out there right now, if you're able to like link, let's say Twitch to a games client, and then you see that this person, they watched esports this much, and they then spent this much money after they watched the esports product. Let's give them like let's take 20% of the money that they then spent and then give it to the orgs and everyone that was involved. Give it to the, give it to the commentators. It only puts more skin in the game for us to make the quality of the broadcast as good as possible. To end things off, I don't think esports is going to die. Esports is going to continue with or without investment from the publishers. Esports lived for 15, 20 years. Competitive gaming lived for 15, 20 years before developers got involved themselves. It's going to continue after, even if they pull out. But I've been in this industry long enough, and I've talked to enough people, I've listened to enough people to know that esports brings a lot more value to publishers and developers than many of them might think. And I just hope that after the esports winter is done, once this big set that frankly was needed because there was a lot of bloat in a lot of areas, but after this reset, as unfortunately bloody as it's turning out to be, after it's done and over, we can start to rebuild in a way that helps reinforce the developers and publishers' best interests, while also not undermining the quality and value and investment that the people that are involved directly in the competitive ecosystem, the players, the fans, the commentators, the team organizations themselves, without undermining their ability to also get rewarded for the work, the time, the effort that they put in to build up the competitive ecosystem of the games that they are involved in. Esports will continue no matter what, but I think that there is still a lot of untapped potential for what it can look like in the future.